And that, of course, was Qantas boss Alan Joyce staking up his claim for Story of the Week. Joining me this week, we've got the Chief Investment Officer at Wealth Manager Beulah Capital, Tom Elliott. Morning, Alan. The Australian Financial Review's Opinion Editor, Joanne Gray. Morning, Alan. Chief Strategist at Morgan Stanley, Gerard Minack. Alan. Welcome to you all.
Thanks.
So, I was looking at the Qantas results, which they announced at the same time as those job cuts. The 66 million was the Qantas profit, but that was after 194 million cost of the strike, and they've split that down. Actually, 100 million of that was the shutdown, and 90 or so million for the previous thing. So, I mean, how do you think they came out of the week for the with all that, their result and the job cuts? The share price actually went up.
Well, I think the fact the share price went up says that the market likes Alan Joyce. They like someone who's prepared to take the hard decisions. They're not going to worry too much about a government that just wants to criticise Qantas for taking a hard line on jobs. And as you said, hopefully the strike won't be repeated. So you could actually see a decent improvement in Qantas's earnings next year.
It wasn't a bad earnings in the end. I mean, if you add back the 194 million from the dispute, it actually wasn't too bad.
Well, it's an achievement just being a profitable airline at the moment, isn't it? So, I mean, the one thing that they're probably struggling with is the currency, which is an issue for a lot of people. But structurally, Qantas is one of the world's best practice airlines.
And of course, the currency is a two-edged sword for Qantas. I mean, jet fuel is priced in US dollars, and as far as I know, aeroplanes are still priced in US dollars. So even though tourism's not doing all that well, the fact is their costs are also US dollar denominated in many cases.
And Joe, he wouldn't have minded Air Australia going broke the other night,
No, I would imagine he'd be quietly cheering about that. But, I mean, the other thing that he's had to do is delay some of those big capital purchases, some of the new aircraft, and those sorts of postponements can't go on forever. So, you know, these review of the crew, the catering arrangements and the maintenance is going to have to go ahead, and now he's involved in a bit of a war, I guess, between Queensland and the Victorian governments to see which of those can offer.
What's going on there?
Well, I mean, Qantas already has some benefits from being in Queensland. It's got an incentive deal with the Queensland government, which is dependent on the number of jobs that it has there. So it's a little bit tied to Queensland because
would they have to give money back if they sack people in Queensland?
They would. Ted Baillieu hasn't been that upfront in offering that many incentives to stay in Victoria, but on the other hand, Ted doesn't have a lot of money to throw around at the moment. So perhaps he might have to get Melbourne Airport or Tullamarine involved in some sort of quid pro quo to convince Qantas to keep some of its facilities.
The union reaction this time was quite interesting. They didn't go ballistic this time at all.
Now, at least this time, we're going to be able to have a look through the figures with them. And look, if it's a genuine impossibility to keep the facilities open here, well, we'll accept that, but we don't believe that'll be the case.
To quote someone else, a lot of unknown unknowns in this. And so we are very keen to sit with the company to get all the facts on the table.
I suppose that's one thing Donald Rumsfeld will always be remembered for, is that quote.
Yeah, I've always thought he should have copyrighted that particular suggestion, but you'd have to say that the bankruptcy overnight of Air Australia has played into Qantas's hands here. I mean, the unions are looking at that and saying, gee, jobs are genuinely being lost. Do we want to, stick our arm in the tiger's cage? And the answer is, I reckon the union movement would be happy just to hang on to the jobs it's still got in the airline industry.
And of course, remember that big dispute earlier this year involved just this very issue of, the fact that fewer maintenance staff were needed for these new planes, and Qantas wanted to make sure that any enterprise agreement that it made recognised that, and it won that argument, and so now the engineers are, having to cop it, essentially.